Devil May Cry, a franchise that is beloved by all, just released their newest game. It's horrible, even when regarding some of their more questionable entries, but even these games pale in comparison to DMC Peak of Combat, a game that promised cool stuff that makes you pay for a third mortgage on your home because Capcom aren't making enough money from remaking every Resident Evil a year. Sure, it's a mobile game, but it wasn't always this bad, so let's get into why this game is so disappointing. First of all, hype around this thing has been pretty big, and this was going to be the mobile game. This had been in development since 2016, and the trailers we got in 2019 made the game look pretty hype. The main appeal of this mobile game was trying to bring that DMC combat onto the small screen. If you don't know, DMC's combat is based around using a variety of weapons and their moves, as well as some guns, each being unique to the character you play as in order to juggle, and some would even say style, on enemies and raise the style meter, which makes you feel cool or something, okay, don't judge me, and defeat enemies and bosses, usually with some kick-ass music in the background, as well as the funny, silly, goofy moment. Now, the original version of DMC Peak of Combat boasted some pretty impressive gameplay for a mobile game. It was very close to the actual DMC games on console. Every character had multiple weapons, the guns and abilities were still in the game, like Dante could use Trickster and Royal Guard. It was basically just a port of the game onto mobile. I remember seeing all this around at some point and thinking, hell yeah, I was hyped to be able to play DMC anywhere. Yes, anywhere. But this game took so long to come out, and I mean, this thing took longer than the actual DMC games. But then the game launched in 2024, January 10th. I was waiting for this thing like a hawk. I downloaded and played this game the day of release. The burning question is, what is the game like? Underwhelming. You start the game off being dropped into the first mission as the pizza man. Ignore this blip, by the way. I didn't know what I was doing. I've never made a video from my phone before, okay? Get off my back! Now, as I was saying, you start off as Dante, and the combat starts pretty early on, meaning you get to try out the new combat system. And right from the get-go, you can see that compared to the first version of the game that was showcased, this system way more dumbed down than the previous one. Dante can no longer use guns and is stuck with just rebellion, meaning the combos you can do are the ones you get with the sword, and that's it. And speaking of combos, they are probably my biggest complaint with this game, because it is stupidly easy to get S ranks just by spamming. I never once felt like I needed to do a real combo in order to beat an enemy, boss, or even get a high score. And this problem continues as you progress through the story. As you unlock Stinger, it has its own separate move or button prompt, obviously because it's a lot harder to just do that on mobile, you know? But the problem is that Stinger is a really important key tool in making combos, and now it's just turned into do big damage button. Even later on, you unlock Devil Trigger when fighting the first boss, which is the same as DMC3, because this game is mostly based around that, and I gotta admit, I really like the design of this new one. And it even starts to play the DMC3 battle music, which is a banger, a certified banger. Anyways, you have your Devil Trigger meter as normal, but instead, it goes up a lot less naturally. And finally, there's a new counter system, which is really easy, because all you have to do is jump just before they hit you, and you get to follow up with massive damage. And we'll get into why the combat's been dumbed down in a second, but despite my gripes with it, it's still decently fun combat, especially for a mobile game. This dumbed down combat is still better than most of the stuff you'd see on the App Store anyway. So let's just finish the tutorial now. Once you beat the boss, you get another cutscene that is straight ripped from DMC3. Afterwards, when you go outside, you get access to a new character, Lady, aka the best character that isn't Dante or Virgil. And for some reason, out of the 3 starting characters, she is by far the best. You see, they forgot the core principle of all DMC games. Don't make the guns do damage. We learn what happens when you do. We end up with DMC2, aka press one button and wait simulator. Now, they did give Lady a gun-oriented moveset in DMC4, but like, it's because her whole character is just using guns. What else can she do? Plus, they were balanced by most of your damage coming from the melee attacks with the rocket launcher, and even then, she was just kind of a half-baked character. She had no real combos. Whereas, as you can see here, I'm doing way more damage for less effort than Dante. And does that remind you of anything? Her abilities are also better in my opinion because they're just raw damage. But I'm getting distracted. And this is kind of a lesser point anyway, as they're both just low-level characters. But something you might have noticed is something ain't right with these two. Something's different. Something's wrong.
Long press the attack key to perform.
Dear God, the voice actors. These guys, they're not good, man. And I'd like to think it's 100% the fault of the higher-ups and their direction. Why do I think this? Maybe it's because the original Dante was replaced between the alpha and the full game's release, as well as most of the features. Rumor even says that the new Dante voice actor isn't even a voice actor, but some guy that won a competition to voice him. Though I'd say take this one with a grain of salt. I couldn't find any other source other than this one random Reddit post. But in its benefit, I couldn't find a credit for the voice actor anywhere, like on IMDb. Dante isn't even listed. Hey, sleep deprived editing Jay here. So they added the Dante voice actor, but it's the old guy, and you can tell from the performance it's not him anymore. So it's like, just what kind of management mess are these guys doing, man? I hate this. But it's pretty clear that the characters in the story mode aren't the original voices, and it's super jarring, especially since in gameplay most of them are the original characters' voice actors, like Daniel Southworth. It's just so weird that they have this massive change between the two. Something that wasn't in the original build is switching between multiple characters. Each time you do, if the bar is charged, they'll do another powerful attack. And around this point is where we get introduced to the gacha system. It is a mobile game after all. How else are they going to make money? Oh, and they have Virgil with an almost full moveset from 5. I mean, one rotation won't hurt, right? It's only... oh my god, I didn't think it would be this bad. £20 isn't even enough for a standard 10-pack summon. Even by gacha game standards, that's pretty bad. Now, it does say that it guarantees the headline character within a certain amount of summons, but it's a large amount of summons, weirdly enough. Now, of course, you can earn these gems by playing the game, either from missions, clearing levels in story, events, etc, etc. But it's quite slow, and eventually you'll run out of story mode gems. You're going to want to use these title card characters because their stats are just straight up better, you know? They start off as S rank when compared to other units that start off on B or A, depending on their rarity. And even as you level them up to S ranks later on in the game, the stats don't measure up to the legendary characters. I mean, this is all standard for a gacha game, right? Characters that are just better locked behind a paywall. Pretty common practice. Well, the main problem with the game, the reason DMC fans are so upset about it, is originally the toolkits that were in the first version of the game got stripped apart in order to feed this gacha element. See, Virgil's base kit in DMC 5 is Yamato, Beowulf, and Mirage Edge, and you would use these three in combination to perform cool combos. Each one has its own utility. Same with Dante and his kit. Stinger is to move you closer to enemies and start a combo, and after a few hits, switch to the next weapon. But you can't do that anymore because all they have is one weapon each, so in most cases they lose a large amount of their movesets. But I will shamefully admit, I spent money for the Beowulf starting Virgil. When I was playing him, I realized the only way to start attacking an enemy was to either run directly up to them or just spam the jumping attack constantly to get close to them, which is what I did for most of the game. Same thing with Dante's Stinger being on cooldown. I would just use it because it came off cooldown even though I was right in front of an enemy's face, and I wouldn't have used it in any other circumstance because I had barely any other alternatives, and it did a slight bit more damage and left a debuff. What the devs intended, it seems, is for you to use your timed abilities on one character, maybe throw an attack chain, then switch to their next character to get their switch attack, use their abilities, and then repeat the cycle. So technically you're using 3 different people's movesets, and in concept that's a cool idea, but in practice it just feels kinda lame, I guess. It's very much just use your strongest abilities on your strongest characters, and it feels like the combat itself is so watered down from the source material, and not to mention the whole thing is just less how good you are at the game and more how high level your characters are, how rare your weapons are, and how high the rarity your party members are, instead of the classic DMC combos, if you get what I mean. This combat system is very much dumbed down, both for new players, which I can understand, and for the gacha element, which is also understandable, but man, damn, never forget what they took from us. I feel robbed. And listen, I get it's only a mobile game, but looking at what it used to be is really what makes this one sting so hard. I mean, this game is the closest we're gonna get to DMC 6 for a while. Because Capcom love to pump out RE remakes whilst every other IP gets breadcrumbs. But I was hyped for this thing, and the level of last minute interference from the higher ups really did ruin this. It's pretty clear the devs had designed something that could have been super fun and probably be the best thing on the App Store. It's just a shame it got stripped down, and from what we've seen from this, we can tell that the gacha system and DMC games really just do not mix well. It's the main problem with this game, and dare I say, those microtransactions could even make a devil cry. The game did have some cool concepts like co-op modes and PvP, but you can't really enjoy them as much as if they were in any other DMC game. Yes, even DMC 2. Okay, maybe not, but still. The story mode, while I wasn't expecting anything from it, was pretty bad. It felt like some cutscenes and transitions would just end really abruptly, and the actual story is so forgettable, I still have no idea what it was about. Plus, all the new characters are some of the least DMC looking individuals I've ever seen. Like at one point, there's this Phantom of the Opera looking guy. They feel like stock characters or something from an asset store. The new art style is kind of hit or miss too. The new Dante models, ooh, I'm not a fan. The base Dante looks off. I can't pinpoint it, but it isn't right. Like his hair's too greasy or his face is slightly off. I mean, we have El Dante and now we have Gachete. Yeah. Virgil, he's fine. Oh yeah, for some weird reason, when you go to summon for weapons to upgrade characters, you can get items like V's cane, despite the fact he isn't in the game yet, so it's essentially just filler loot to use as XP. Just thought it'd be worth mentioning. Now, I'm really entering the bottom of the barrel, but this game doesn't have a home screen, which may not sound like a big deal, but that means the UI is always on screen. It's like comically bad, and I hate it. It's literally the bad UI meme. Anyway, despite everything I've said, this game really isn't that bad. It's just kind of disappointing and mid. A lot of things could have been cool, but they got fumbled pretty hard. The whole thing just got watered down and turned into a cheap cash grab, and it's a shame, but at the end of the day, it's a mobile game. But it has one redeeming quality. It gave us this banger from Casey Edwards.